Alright, hello everyone. This video is gonna be a quick short guide on how IB expects you to write your computer science pseudocode. I'm gonna be covering today loops, which are the most difficult, in my opinion. However, we're gonna start with basic examples. First of all, we got arrays. So arrays are basically tables. They can be 2D arrays, they can be one-dimension arrays. So this would be an example of a one-dimension array. So we have an R1, and we have a list essentially of those. If we wanted to have a 2D array, which isn't required, but if it shows up on your exam, it's better to understand how they work. So a 2D array would be defined in a difference. You would be not defined. You would get a different request basically to pull that information. So let me pull up Visual Studio code and let me show you what I mean. So in Visual Studio code, we can see, for example, array, and let's say this is our position in this specific array, the R1. Let's say R1, and let's say this is an output. So what this will do is you might think logically, oh well, I mean, it's the first space, isn't it? No, computers think differently than humans. It starts at 0. So if you wanted to imagine this, you would have to think of it that each space has a different index like this. So let me put index here. And this would be your index for this stuff, for the array only. In case of queue and stack, it's going to be different, but I'm going to explain how they work in a split second. So in case of arrays, this is a one-dimensional array. But if we add R2, let's say, and it's a two-dimensional array, right? So we have one dimension, so going this way. And let's say we have 50, 60, 70, nope, 70, and 80. So now this is a two-dimensional array. So not only you have index of this place, so this is from 0 to 3. Let me just, bruh. Alright, so index, so you have this dimension, so columns, right? And then you have the rows, which is also a different index. So it would go slightly like more like this. So let me just replace some stuff. And hold on. Alright, so alright, so these are our indexes. Here also we have a 0. Because we're talking about, actually here we have a 0, because this is the index of this one, and here a 1. So now we can see that these indexes go somewhere around like this. So I have this index of of rows, and this index of the columns, which gives us the location. So if I had something like, in case of R2, right? R2, then we have an array, and then I want to pull this value, so 70. So I would first type in the row it is in, sorry, the column, so just 2, and then comma, which separates it, and then I want to choose the row, the row, yes. So it is 1. So now this would return this value. However, 2D arrays are rare on IB exams, so I'm gonna focus today only on one-dimensional arrays. So for today's video, I'm gonna use DeepJane. DeepJane is a pseudocode compiler, which simply works like any other compiler. For example, Python compilers, Java compilers, etc., etc. But let's write our first array code. Let's say we have a predefined array, so array R1. And to define the values in an array, we would use square brackets, then 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So these are our array values. So now, to output all of them, we could do a loop. Loops are very important. Remember, I'm going to explain in a sec what each part of the loop does. loop I, so this is our index, from 0 to r1 dot length minus 1. So what this simply does is changes this value for each iteration of this loop. This loop will go by 1. So loop I, so this value, from 0, so our starting position, to the length of the array minus 1. The reason why we do it, r1 length, what it will do is simply take the length of the array, so 5, but we want to start from 0 to our index, so from here, when the code runs, so we subtract 1, and then we get the proper array loop, array index. So now what we would do is output r1 and then square brackets I. What this does is outputs per each iteration of this loop r1 and our index. So this should be 10. Let me finish this loop. So end loop. I recommend you can type in end, but I recommend using end loop, because if you do, for example, you have if statements, right? Let me do if and then r1 dot length is equal to, let's say, 5, right? So we want it to output only at 5. Then output high. So now, if you have a long amount of code, you can at least know what this ends. So this if. Don't never name your ifs like if 12, if etc. You have to look through the code on paper and just see it. The pseudocode compiler, I know it is ineffective. You should do it with your teacher, which I'm gonna leave a task for you at the end of the video, which you're gonna see later. But this should print basically high after if this array length is correct. Let's see. So first of all, our array outputs. So this is the loop. So we did everything correctly. And then high. So if array1 length is equal to 5, then output high and if. This is simply for organization. You don't have to do it, but I recommend you do it. Naming, you should have covered with your teachers, so I expect you during this video to follow through with those naming structures. You can name things differently than me, but remember, examiners still look at it. Alright, so we are done with our first array code. Let's move on to queues. I've prepped a small queue code for you guys to understand what queues are. But I'm gonna use our favorite program, which is MS Paint, to draw what a queue is. So imagine a line to a store, right? So let's say we have a desk here, right? And when we use enqueue, so we want to queue someone into the line, we add to an existing thing. So let's say this person is 1, this person is 2, and this person is 3. So what will happen, if we enqueue one more thing, we're gonna add on to this location. And if we dequeue, this front value is gonna be dequeued and outputted. So to follow through with this, we have queue, so we define the queue. It is an empty queue. Remember, this is how you define a queue. It isn't defined like an array, it's gonna crash your code in DeepJane, but remember, on the exam, it's better to write like this than differently. So we have queue1 equals to a queue with empty space. Let me, for example, type in, I don't know, uday, as a joke. And this is what's gonna be also enqueued, but this is only for a test. So uday is being served, Alice is being served, Bob is being served, Charlie is being served. So to add on values, you just type in a comma and more. Let's see, will the code break if we add a integer value? Let's say 12. Let's see. Yes, it will work. Because it is in pseudocode, you assume this is automatically two-stringed, like you would in C#. So let's delete this. And let's see how it works. So we have uday. Uday is being served. So we have DQ'd the first person. Then after this DQ happens, right? Oh yeah, hold on. I forgot to explain. Loop while not. Not is inverting whatever it is. So if we have a active switch, for example, then not is simply the reverse of an active switch, so off. But if it's off, it's gonna be on, if it's a not. But Q1 is empty. So we check if this queue is empty. So is it empty? Well, it's not empty because we have people in the queue. So this value changes from false to true, so the while can continue. The while loop only works if a value is true. If it's false, it's gonna completely exit. So we have person, so our string value, which will be equal to the q1.dq. So output person, and then is being served. So we're outputting what we have DQ'd from the queue. And at the next iteration, because that value is already gone, we're gonna move on to the next. So from uday to Alice. And that's how the code will see it. Great, we've covered queues. Now we're gonna move on to stacks. Stacks are, like the name suggests, a stack. All right, so in case of this code, this is a stack code. In case of stack, we are gonna do a reverse of what a queue is. So instead of removing from the front, we remove it from below. Imagine books, you just pull out from the bottom of the stack. So what this does is we define a word, hello, and then reversed as an empty value where we can plug in the reversed code, the reversed word. We define our stack, so my stack is stack, so the same as queues before. So loop I from 0 to length of word, -1. Remember about this -1 because it still matters. This word is working like an array, so remember this is how you write it. I don't know why on DeepJane if you type in it differently, so word.length like this and then separate this, it's gonna break. It doesn't work. So in order for this to work, you have to type in it like this. And then we push from our stack, so word I, and we just push in all these letters into the stack. So if we want to push in something into the stack, let's say we have an empty box, then we start pushing in. So we're pushing the first book here, and the second book here, then third book, and fourth book. So looking at this code, we're gonna see that this stack is being pushed word I. So loop while not my stack is empty, similar to our queue before, reversed is equal to. So reversed, our empty string, plus what we pop from our stack. So we pop it from behind. I want to clarify something. I explained it wrong. Sorry, I've been recording this for a while now. However, when we push something into the stack, we push it to the bottom. So similarly to a queue, but instead of pulling from the front, we pull from the back and we push to the back. So we're pushing this like a normal word would be pushed. So let's do like this. We have hello. So word I, so this is being pushed into my stack. My stack, sorry for my writing, but using a mouse is difficult. So we have, this will be equal to hello, right? And to reverse it, we have to pop it. So we remove it from the end, and that's what's gonna happen. Reversed is gonna be empty, so whatever is already here, plus stack pop. Why do we do this? So if we had, if we popped this O, right, it's gonna be in reversed, right? And then if we didn't have this reversed, we would just change it to L. But because we have reversed plus my stack, right, we add on to what's already there. So L, L, So this is how it works. So congrats, now you at least know what stacks, arrays, and queues are. So I'm gonna show you an example code, and I'm gonna ask you to do it on your own. Actually, not a full code. I'm gonna show you how functions work. So we first of all define a function. So function check pass is input pass. So this is the value that we want to check. And let me copy over this function. Let's see if it works. Nothing should happen. Yeah, because we're not calling the function. What's happening here is input password. So if input pass is 1234, then return true, else return false, and function. What this does is whatever we input into a function. So let's say we type in check password, right? And we call this with, I don't know, 42, like a reverse, right? And then we add a condition check, like this. If check password, oh yeah, hold on, I forgot. We have to add this part. So our input and our output, to make it simpler. So let me type in a example password, which is 4321. So access denied because the password was incorrect. It was 4321. What I want you to do with this code already, right, is to make it so this code is looped. So if you enter the wrong password, it will redo it again. I know I haven't showed this, but it is a good practice to at least for you to learn on your own. I know it's hard, however, you gotta deal with certain issues. But all I'm gonna say, this is a key, right? And this should be moved somewhere else. You're gonna do something like this, by the way, which you just don't check for a value, right? So if you do something like this, you probably can figure out something. Let's do this and think of what will happen after I run it. Name password is not defined. So this hasn't been defined. So please tell me what I did wrong in here. Well, if you want it to work, then you know.